Last September, Alan joined me in our formal gardens to help plant some garlic, and today he's back to tell us how it's coming along. Alan, is it ready to harvest?
Not quite yet, Steve. We've got the leaves are starting to dry down, and this is the time that we want to look for. And it's a sign telling us that the plants are starting to go dormant and
getting close.
Getting close.
Now, you tell me that once they start drying out, you cut off the water. Is that right?
Yeah. Don't water at all. Let the ground dry out, and the bulbs will start drying out in the ground, and that's what we want to see.
Okay, now remind us again, we experiment a little bit because there are various ways to start these from the tops or bottoms. Show us how you did that.
Well, we had a very good year this year, Steve, and so we've got some really good sized bulbs down here. But what we started out was with a seed head, and one of these bulblets started this corm, and this is what we call a 1 year, and one of the 1 year cloves started this bulb, and one of the second year cloves started this bulb, and this is what we ended up here. And each year we've grown a little bit bigger in size.
Okay, so this one is really 2 years
in the making
to get to that size, so that's pretty good size. Well, really, this isn't too bad, is it, from a bulblet then?
No, that's excellent.
Okay.
Normally what I've seen before is ones that are just about the size of a quarter.
Okay.
And have like 3 or 4 cloves around it.
All right. So we're going to let the foliage dry out a little bit more. Now, I think people can tell too that on these behind us you trim the stem out. Why did you do that?
Well, I have found if I trim the stem out, it causes the bulb to enlarge. But if you keep water on it, you also cause a rotting problem, which we've heard about.
Okay. Now, of course, there's some varieties too that really you don't want to cut the stem out, right? Because it can cause the bottom to rot too. So there's so many different types out there, you really need to do trial and error, I think, on some of it.
I do agree.
Okay, now once it's ready, what are you going to do?
I'm going to treat it just about like an onion. I'm going to pull it up, and here we'll pull this one up and get underneath it here and just let it sit on top of the ground for a couple hours, and then we'll take it inside.
Okay, well, Alan, we appreciate you joining us. It looks like we're going to have a pretty good harvest, and of course we have a few leaf spots on the foliage just like so many of our other plants, and again we think they're a couple of weeks behind too. Normally we would have already harvested. And once you get them harvested, then what's the next step, or what do you do with the garlic at that point? Well, to answer these questions, we invited a garlic enthusiast, Kathy Woods from Chandler, to show us how to clean, dry, and braid these culinary delights. And Kathy and her family stopped by our studio gardens to help us out. And it's interesting, she's been growing garlic for about 5 years and sells her braids at the Shawnee Farmers Market. Now, Kathy tells us that when she harvests them, she really likes the leaves to be dried out pretty thoroughly, and the stems can still be a little bit green, but especially the leaves need to be dry. And the first thing that she does, she showed us how she just kind of washes them off in a bucket or a container of water. And you'll notice she doesn't soak the garlic because that would take up too much moisture, and she actually wants them to be pretty dry, so she just barely dips them in, and she starts peeling the skin back off of the neck and on the bulb. And that's where you get your whiter color, and actually she tells us as they dry they become even more whiter. Now, some of those hard spots she'll actually use a soft bristled toothbrush to kind of help peel the skin back, or she'll also use them in cleaning out the root system where it's a little bit dirtier and harder to clean. Once they're cleaned up, she lays them on just basically a window screen where they get good air circulation, and she puts them on a porch where they get a little bit of morning sun. But air circulation is very important, and she lets them dry a little bit, and she watches them on a daily basis. And the root system, once it starts to dry and you see a little bit of drying and shriveling on the bulb and stem, and she'll actually feel of them, and she can tell they're ready to go ahead and go to work for braiding. Now, she doesn't let them dehydrate. A lot of people will over dry them at this stage, and when you try to braid them, the paper can actually break. So timing and watching them is very crucial. The next step then in preparing them for braiding, she'll cut off the bulblets or the seed part on the top. She'll trim the roots up a little bit where they're a little bit nicer and easier to work with. And then she takes a knife and makes a cut or a slit right up the stem from the neck part near the bulblet or the corm, right up to the end of the part of the stem where it starts turning greener color. And this is really where what she refers to as the papery leaves start, or actually stop growing, so it's more stem towards the top. Once she's made the cut, she just peels back basically the papery stems all the way back down to the end, peels it back a little bit, and then she cuts the hard part of the stem out. Now they're not quite ready to go again. She'll kind of feather out the papery leaves and let them dry inside this time in a cool, dry area. She keeps them away from direct sunlight, lets them dry a little bit longer before she starts the braiding process. Kathy also tells us that she can braid anywhere from 18 to 33 of the garlic bulbs or corms. Our particular one, she showed us how she used a little bit larger garlic bulbs, and she used 18 of them. Now, as I was watching Kathy, she really is just like an artist, because she would group the garlic by size and she would choose special ones to fit in her finished product or design. She started out using 3 garlics with just a basic braid, but then she tells me that she compares it to like a French braid with hair, where she would add ones to the side and into the center, usually choosing a little bit bigger ones to fill in the void space in the center to make it, again, a little bit more neater and an overall appearance of a lot nicer display. As she's braiding with the French braid style, to make it a little bit easier and keep better control, once she braids the sides and centers in, she twists the leaves as she goes up to make it a little bit easier in controlling. Then she adds a last garlic and basically finishes with a traditional braid again, a little bit further. She'll tie it off with string at the top and then again at the very bottom, and that's to keep it from unraveling. Plus she can use a string to hang them up in her home. She trims the ends off a little bit, and they're really not ready yet to hang up again, because she'll lay them flat on the back side to let them dry a little bit more, and also they'll get a little bit stiffer and will hang nicer laying them flat to finish drying. The other thing interesting, Kathy brought one that was a year old that still looked in great shape. It had shriveled a little bit, but she showed me how there's a big difference in the weight as well. Now once they're ready to go and she hangs them up, it's also very important to know how to use them if you're going to actually use them in the kitchen. Kathy told us that she'll cut one from the top and harvest them from the top of the braid as you go down. That way you can leave them in the braid format and just cut them off as you use them right there in the kitchen. Well, the other interesting thing that Kathy brought along was another cultivar variety of garlic that she found at an Oriental market that is actually what she calls soft stem garlic. And when they grew, they didn't produce a seed top or a real thick stem like the others, but she still went ahead and split them like she did the other one, but she didn't have the hard stem to cut out, and she let them dry a little bit. So she's experimenting with those this year to see how well they'll braid, and if it's an extra step she can save a little bit of time on. Now, one thing we found about garlic in researching it, there's not a lot of good information out there that really talks about braiding. Now, there's some articles in various magazines about how to grow it, and we've even found some sources that might specialize in garlic, but the thing is, it's trial and error, and that's what Kathy's talked about, how she found out about particular ways she can grow it, practices, etc., just like we're trying here in our garden. So again, it's trial and error, and you may have to search your libraries or garden centers and talk to your gardening friends to get more information. Well, now let's go into the kitchen with Barb and see how she's going to prepare this aromatic herb.